Now we are going to focus on the three typical different phases of a skill within the perfect technical model. These are the preparation, execution and recovery phases, and we are going to look at what they're composed of. If we look at this through an example, as we can see on the screen, of a back handspring and gymnastics, we know that it is an advanced skill and that it needs to be taught using the correct technical model with the coaching points in order to prevent injuries to the gymnast and allow them to develop the confidence to execute it well and perform it in a floor routine. The back handspring can be broken down into different technical components. The standing back handspring has a three-phase sequence described as the up, sit, jump. The gymnast begins in the up phase. This is also known as the preparation phase, where they stand flat-footed straight up with their arms positioned in front at an angle at 90 degrees, with the palms facing downwards just above the horizontal plane. Next, the gymnast will progress into the sit phase, which involves the gymnast swinging their arms down by their sides while bending their legs at the knees and sitting back into a chair-like position. This promotes the gymnast into an unbalanced position, which prepares them to jump upwards and backwards. So this allows the momentum to the body to rotate. In the jump phase, the arms are swung up to the ears while jumping and reaching backwards, which allows the transition to the arch position, as we can see in the third picture. Bringing the arms to the gymnast's ears sustains the head in the neutral position and protects it while keeping the arms and legs together and straight through the manoeuvre before the hands contact the floor. Once the hands have made contact with the floor, which we can see in the fourth picture, the momentum is generated from the manoeuvre, which allows the arc position to transition to a linear shape in a handstand-like motion. Then the hands are pushed into the floor, generating the force for the snap down into the feet first rotation, and then they land in the standing stationary position, remaining balanced by positioning themselves behind their centre of gravity. So this is the three phases that explained through an example, and the picture here demonstrates how the gymnast transitions from this chair-like position into this arc shape and then into the handstand before the snap down when the feet make contact with the floor in order to rebound into a standing upright position. There are many different methods we can use to determine and achieve the perfect model, and this involves analysing the performance and comparing it to the perfect model. This could be someone who is experienced in the skill, like an elite athlete who has the correct technique. There are many types of software that can be used to analyse performance. The main method that coaches tend to use is recording the athlete performing the skill and then potentially using software to replay the video in slow motion or overlay it with a different elite performer, perhaps look at different types of angles. As we can see on the screen, there's lots of different ways using quantitative data to interpret the performance. This is extremely useful as both the performer and coaches can observe the performance and repeat this in the specific stages to compare with the perfect technical model and provide a better picture for the athlete on how they can change certain movements to improve the technique to see their actual performance and not just how they think they are performing. So it gives them that mental representation that they need themselves to know what they have to do, so it doesn't just come from the coach, they actually can feel the movement for themselves. This technique is often used for beginners and group sessions, so the coaches can use the footage to make these vital corrections based on the individual, as not all stages will every individual struggle with. So this allows them to be more accurate and to develop their knowledge of the skill and the right way to teach it, so it's beneficial to both the coaches and the performers. It also allows you, the software, to adjust the speed of the footage so it can enable you to look in greater detail on what is actually happening, and from different angles allows you to see the strengths and weaknesses, as knowing the common errors are important to reflect on your performance. One piece of software that is commonly used is coaches software. This allows you to place two images of different performers of different standard performing the same skill next to each other to help you see the differences and similarities in the performance, and then identify the coaching points accordingly to try to imitate the technique. So normally this is next to an elite performer and someone who's quite experienced in the skill. So for example, if you were playing basketball, you may be put next to someone who's a professional basketball player, same in football, football like Wayne Rooney, who's quite experienced maybe in taking free kicks if you were taking free kicks in football. So you could sort of see the differences and similarities and maybe see where you're going wrong and maybe where your strengths are. This software allows you to draw angles. So for example, in the back handspring, you can use the angles to see if the gymnast's arm is being positioned in the correct way from the cited literature of 90 degrees, and whether the angle is too short or too much. This will then affect the amount of force generated to cause under or over rotation. So by looking at the angles, it allows you to really refine these details and measure these to the perfect technical model. Another program which is very similar to Coach's software is Dartfish. This allows you not only to overlay images next to each other, but on top of each other to further compare and identify key actions where you can review and edit the footage in real time to define the athlete's strategies. It allows the footage to be replayed, zoomed in, and adding effects like tables, lines and angles so you can gain a more visual representation of your performance and how you are doing the skill to how it should be executed. It is very flexible and adaptable to the individual and their needs, so for their sports, so it allows them to manipulate the tags to make them appropriate keywords for their sport, and once the skill has been analysed, it can summarise the data in a table or graph to provide a quantitative summary which can be used in future performances to compare progress and reflection. For example, when collecting data from a gymnast to analyse their back handspring technique, a coach will use software like Dartfish to overlay the gymnast with an elite performer like Simone Biles, and to identify similarities in performance and technique, and to identify errors, for example in the arm swing, the jump and rebound, where the hands make contact with the floor in terms of blocking and repulsion. So it can be a really good method to use using software to help the performer give that mental and visual representation of what they're doing, and by seeing someone who's quite experienced in the skill might allow them to also maybe use some of their techniques if that works best for them and they think that that might be beneficial in helping their performance. Now we are going to look at shooting in basketball. So we're going to explain the preparation, execution and recovery phases through an example of a jump shot in basketball. So on the screen we can just see the three phases. So on the left we have the preparation phase, we have a picture to represent that. In the middle we have the execution phase, and on the right we have the follow through or recovery phase. And below the pictures I've just put some of the key coaching points that we're going to discuss through an example, and our performer that we recorded and we got footage for of them actually doing the skill to compare to an elite performer. So we will come back to these on the next slides. So now we're going to apply this to the technical model of this specific jump shot in basketball. I've been working with the basketball students at Basvik to help them to improve their shooting technique in their jump shots so they can improve their accuracy and feel more confident in a game situation. The jump shot at the free throw line is one of the shooting techniques that players use in a game of basketball. But this shot is most appropriate if a player is being closely marked by the opposition. According to Stix et al., it amounts to over 70% of all shots during a game, which then makes them a vital element in a match and requires a high level of performance. The jump shot is classified as a complex skill, and this makes it difficult to be taught by coaches, especially for beginners who are just starting to play basketball. Due to the many different forms and techniques adopted when executing it, it can make it difficult to determine the perfect technical model and necessary coaching points to break the skill down into. So it is important that the coach is experienced with the jump shot and can address faults with the skill early on so it can have a positive impact on the player's confidence and to prevent habits that will affect their performance in the future. It is also important with the jump shot that the coaches teach it in both catching and dribbling situations so they can promote the athlete to be more comfortable and confident in these situations, as only developing one in absence with the other will weaken their ability and their overall skill, and be able to adapt the skill in match situations will be very dramatically reduced. It is advised by coaching manuals and the USA basketball body that the player can first master the set shot, which provides a foundation to develop the correct technique for the jump shot. so with the addition of the jump doesn't affect the skill. So this means by having the foundations that the player can then work on the jump and incorporating that into the skill with the necessary coaching points to produce a perfect technical model and a method which benefits their individual differences. The jump shot can be broken down into 6 distinct phases, which allows it to be isolated and taught before connecting it with the other skills like dribbling. It is important for a basketball player to master the training basics before they attempt the jump shot, especially if they are a beginner. It is vital that the player can throw and catch accurately with control in both a standing position and in motion like dribbling in a game situation where they may be up against an opponent. So this forms the good coordination and the confidence and strength in an offensive to take on a player in an attempt to move the ball down the court or towards the goal, but also in a defensive position to intercept passes and to mark the players. The preparation phase is one of the most important elements in the jump shot, because if the player doesn't arrange and form the correct movement, it can affect the whole skill, and therefore the fluidity of the technique is rapidly reduced. So by identifying the correct coaching points can help with the technique to prepare for the execution and recovery phases later on in the manoeuvre. So here we have the preparation phase, and this is the first phase of the jump shot. Before we talk about the preparation phase, we're going to talk about the correct reception. So this is where, when the ball is received, the player's eyes should be aligned to focus on the basket. This helps the player to anticipate the target very early, so it gives them more time for decision making about the right distance and force needed for the jump shot, and to hold the ball steadily but loosely in front of their body, with their middle finger of their dominant hand pointing forwards, and the non-dominant hand for support in the T shape. As the player is then ready to start the jump shot, they move into the first phase, the stance, which is known as the preparation phase. And this is the correct position that the player needs to be in order to execute the right movement to perform the skill. This then allows them to be in a position where they are square to the hoop, which then helps their alignment of themselves and the ball to make the throw at the accurate angle and to move in a straight line. One key coaching point is for the athlete to align their body so their midline gaze and the ball are positioned in a straight line towards the basketball hoop. This ultimately helps to control balance so the athlete can position themselves where they feel that they can increase their stability and that they can produce the momentum for the jump to allow optimal accuracy in the shot. Another coaching point is the stance. This is critical to allow the vertical position to be achieved in the jump. It is taught that the players should position themselves square to the basket with their bodies facing the hoop and their feet parallel, with being no wider than shoulder width apart. This allows the basketball player to generate their maximum level of power and make sure it is equally distributed across their body. By having a stance which is wider than shoulder width apart will make it more difficult to balance and achieve the correct position from the dribble, which affects the whole jump shot skill and the balancing of the forces. But also by having a low stance on receiving the ball will help to encourage the performer to move in an upwards direction only, as opposed to forwards, which makes the shot faster with a quick release. So this coaching point is taught by coaches, especially in beginners when learning the skill, so it can be ingrained in their performance to help with the fluidity and to make it much more automatic and performed without much thought. This helps especially in a match situation, which could be an important one, which adds added pressure. For example, if it's a rival team, by having the correct position and technique means the player can concentrate on the release of the ball and the shooting technique as opposed to the players that they may find threatening. However, this can be affected based on the individual differences, so different individuals may choose to stagger their stance by having their more dominant foot slightly in front of their non-shooting foot, which may be more comfortable and goal benefiting as they feel more stabilised to control the forward, backward and side forces placed over their centre of mass, to remain aligned in the straight line with the basket. If the player adopts these coaching points, it can contribute towards the perfect technical model of achieving an accurate shot in the later stages. Other important points to consider would be for the athlete to bend their knees and position their body slightly tilted forwards. This would help them to generate the force needed for the jump in the execution phase to gain an adequate level of momentum to jump upwards as opposed to forwards.